Hey you guys, what's up and welcome back to Two Toe Tags and Metal Reviews, and today we're celebrating 40 years of Bathory. So, self-titled, debut album, 1984, it's been 40 years, that's crazy.
One of the grandfathers of just black metal overall.
That's right, and you know, a lot of black metal bands were heavily influenced by this band and this album. And you know, if you hear it, you can see why, right? You can see where the roots are of the genre. They live in this album and they are all around it, both audibly and thematically and all that stuff. It's all good stuff. But I've heard this album before. This is not new to me, but it's pretty new to you.
It is.
So I'm just curious to know what you think after a week of listening to it. We can go to my thoughts after, but I want you to take the floor, and I want to hear your thoughts first.
Bathory. Here's the interesting thing, and this has been expressed, you know, multiple times on this channel, that I struggle with some album mixes being too rough, right?
Like lo-fi.
I don't know if I'd even call it lo-fi. I would just call it low production, right? And we saw it with Dark Throne. That was rough.
Yeah.
Like that was tough. But I did not have a problem with this album's mix, which kind of surprised me at first. Because I thought, like, okay, this is like, you know, it's an old school, it's 1984. They recorded this in a studio that was like a converted garage, basically. But I was fine with it. It's like, you know, obviously it sounds old because it is old. It's 40 years old, but I did not have any problems, and I'm glad for that. And I like that it feels and is raw and old school, but like, I can vibe with that. Like, I can put that on and be like, yeah, here it is, here's the riffs, here's what's going on. And, you know, you might be a little bit more knowledgeable about some of this kind of stuff than me, but it kind of felt like some of these songs took a bit from early thrash, which kind of makes sense because at that time thrash was also developing.
Yeah.
Like early 80s. So, you know, a song like Reaper, if you listen to that song with kind of like a thrashier mindset, it totally fits in with that vibe and that sound.
There are several songs that, like,
It's not the only one, this is an example.
there are people that put Bathory in the thrash category.
Yeah, and
Right.
I can totally see why.
And I don't think they're wrong in certain sentences. Yeah.
Now, Reaper is actually one of my favorite tracks from this record. It was just the riff. The riff and just, no Reaper, like, for every chorus, it's just, I liked that. That was just, it was something that just jumped out more than other stuff, right?
Yeah.
Now, another thing to note is something interesting that, you know, most listeners of this album would not really experience these days, but there's an intro track and an outro track. But on the original pressing of this album, the intro into Hades and War into the outro were both a single track.
Right.
They only started splitting them when they started remastering this album in the early 90s. For our purposes of this review, we decided to count those first two, the intro and Hades and War and the outro, as a single track.
Yeah, so we're basically reviewing the original track list. The album as it was presented originally, yeah.
Exactly.
8 tracks.
Now, Hades is an interesting one because that intro is way too long.
Yeah.
And it's funny because before I listened, I'm like, why did they split these? What's going on? And then I listened and I'm like, oh, that's why.
It's like 3 minutes of basically nothing, man.
3 minutes of nothing. Now, Hades is all right. It's fine. So it's like, okay, you kind of get a point for that, but like 3 minutes of nothing, like straight up nothing. Nothing that builds, it's just kind of like ambient sound. It's like not even like there's something crazy evil going on. It's just like stuff, and then Hades starts. So I feel like shorten that, but you know what?
Or eliminate it.
Or eliminate it, but I think it was wise to split those tracks. I mean, with War and outro, it doesn't really make as much sense because outro is only like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was talking to a buddy of mine. He made a good point. He's like, you split them so it looks like, whoa, there's 10 tracks on this album as opposed to 8. It kind of looks more appealing that way, even though you're kind of like lying because 2 of them aren't really like full songs.
No. Yeah.
It's a possibility, but I think a big part of it probably was like, man, this intro's too long. Let's just kind of split that so you can get right to the action early enough. But, you know, I was kind of running into a thing with this album where a lot of songs kind of did similar things. Like, I feel like I heard Hades, I heard Reaper. After that, everything kind of sounded like one of those 2 songs in some way. to a degree. So it's like you look at In Conspiracy with Satan, it's kind of like Hades, but better. I feel like it's a bit more clear and it doesn't have the long ass intro to it. So I like, that song, okay, not bad.
Did you notice that was spelled wrong on Spotify?
Yeah, Conspiracy.
Conspiracy.
So I don't know.
It's spelled correctly on the original album.
Oh, is it?
It is, yeah.
Oh, that's a Spotify.
Conspiracy.
Conspiracy with Satan.
Yeah, I thought that was funny.
So, yeah, and I feel like the riff in the chorus of War, I like that as well. But overall, a lot of the songs were just like, in a simple manner, good. Just cool riffs, kind of just goes hard, that's it. It's very straightforward, right? There's no crazy strings attached. So what's difficult though is when you're listening to it casually versus when you're listening to it with a critical ear to review.
Yeah.
Because I can throw this album on and enjoy the riffs. If I'm busy working on something and I throw this album on, there's some stuff like, yeah, this is cool, yeah. And I don't have to focus on it super hard. But if I focus on this super hard, there's not that much content to find until you start repeating stuff.
Yeah,
and that's the issue.
I have the same issue too, and I've said this on other reviews before, where I wonder how I'd feel if I could go back in time and listen to this as an adult when it's brand new, without having all the stuff that came after it basically tainting my perception and opinion of music. And I wonder if I would listen to this and go, oh wow, look at all this amazing new stuff. Like, it's hard when we listen to music for so long and listen to so much different styles of metal and stuff like that, to listen to something that's this old and this kind of just fundamentally sound, but almost very basic, and appreciate it. Because we've just heard so much stuff that's just been an evolution of this throughout the years.
I mean, there's some albums, especially this one included, that kind of stand a test of time that people still even call back to today as some of the best. So obviously there is a staying power with those, but it's interesting, like imagine if we did, listen to this when it came out or whatever, like if we had the chance to do that, like what that perspective would be like, because all the stuff that we've checked out, not only throughout everything, all time, throughout this past week of black metal, all this stuff, most of it did not exist in any capacity.
Yeah.
So this was the new thing at the time. So, I am interested in like what our kind of perspective would be if it was like that. And I feel like, if you know somebody that's not into black metal, start them with this and see what they think. If they're into metal and they want to get into black metal and they don't listen, that would be a worthy kind of experiment to do.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting one.
Like what that perspective would be.
I think definitely in the overall realm of metal, something like this is a lot more accessible than throwing something like Meshuggah at them.
That's
out of the
true.
gate.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Like, it's definitely on the more accessible side. I would say this is, I wouldn't know, it's probably as accessible as maybe Iron Maiden. It's in the same kind of level of accessibility.
To a degree. It's not as
problem is-
melodic though.
It's definitely not as melodic, and I do think that the whole satanic imagery thing is going to scare a lot of people away. Because a lot of people, just simply don't like that, or they're, they get offended by it or whatever. So there's that aspect to it as well. But yeah, this, it all started, it didn't all start from, but I think when Venom came out in the early, 81, 82, they really kicked things off with the way music basically spread into a bunch of different things with thrash metal, death metal, and black metal, the three extreme genres. And you can tell there's definitely influence on this album to Venom's black metal. Not only the title black metal and this, kind of piggybacking off that, but even the name of the band. There's a song on that album. It's called something of Bathory, or maybe it's just called Countess Bathory or something like that.
Yeah.
But I would bet money that Bathory got their influence for their name from that album. Even the font they use is the same font they use on that album. You can tell where the trajectory is of music and how it's gone.
They probably listened to that, thought, oh, who's Elizabeth Bathory? Oh, whoa, this is cool. Yeah, let's name ourselves after that.
Exactly. And then you can see by the song titles, Hades, Reaper, Necromancy, Sacrifice, In Conspiracy with Satan, they're all very hellish kind of.
Yeah.
They're going for a vibe, right? They got the goat head on the album
the goat
cover.
head, which on the original pressing was this weird kind of yellow. Apparently they wanted it to be gold, but they couldn't get it to work, so they kind of made it yellow, and they're like, it looks weird. So everything after that was just the black and white, which was for the best, because it looks cool that way.
Yeah, I think it looks cool both ways, but I just think overall it's a cool cool album cover.
It's like, yeah, it is.
As far as songs that I liked, I thought, let's see, where's my highlights? Reaper, yeah, that's one of my highlight songs. Necromancy was good. And Raise the Dead. Those are the 3 songs that I thought were the highlights. So that's tracks 2, 3, and 7. You're right, though. Most of these songs, they kind of just happen. And, you know, if it's on in the background, it feels fine. But when you really start paying attention to it, there's not really a lot going on there. Which, again, that's why I said I wonder how I would feel if I was listening to this without my mind being tainted with all this stuff that's happened between 1984 and 2024, 40 years of stuff. So, the biggest takeaway from this, positively though, is probably the riffs, right? The riffs are catchy, they can be infectious. You know, you have cool things like, you know, trills and things like that, which were probably something that were relatively new to music at the time. And they're probably things that, you know, impressed some people. You got a bit of double bass and stuff like that. And, you know, the harsh lyrics on top, the harsh vocals on top of everything, which aren't super harsh, but for the time, again,
So the lyrics are also certainly pretty harsh.
Yeah, so, you know, there's a lot of things going. I think just anybody that's just like a metalhead, if you just like just plain metal or just the fundamentals of metal, really, I think this is an album you can put on and really get behind and enjoy it. But as soon as you start trying to focus on it and really start to pay close attention to it, you know, for the purpose of a review, for example, you might start getting lost for things to take away from it. And that's a bit of a downfall. But again, is that time's fault or is that the album's fault? That's really hard to say.
And it's difficult because some albums don't really feel like they're kind of meant to be picked apart like that. It's just straightforward, simple metal.
But we're just doing it because that's what we do on this channel.
That's how we do things here. Anyway, other things we do things here are rate these albums. So let's get to that. I'm going to rate it first and say that this album is good. I generally enjoyed it. For the purposes of the review, though, it was kind of hard to have takeaways from it. I still did enjoy it, though. I liked this album, but for as the numbers went for the rating system, this album's getting a 5.5 from me.
Cool, 5.5 from Mr. TV Fish. For me, I think the strongest point of this album, I know I said riffs, and I do still feel that way, but the overall arcing strong point is the fundamental values this album brings. It's just like, you know, this album is the roots of a lot of metal that came after it in many ways. So I think that alone gives it a bit of prowess. It gives it you know, you have to respect it in that sense. But if I'm gonna review it with the same type of metrics and the same type of critiques that I do every other album I review, unfortunately the songs just don't score that high. So as much as I can respect this album, as much as I can like this album, it's just not a strong scoring album for me. So after all my scoring, it ended at a 4.5 for me. But anyways, that's it for this review of Bathory. So we want you guys to leave your comments down below and let us know what you guys think of this album after 40 years. And let us know if you're hearing it for the first time lately or if you've been listening to this album for many, many decades. Let us know in the comments below. Anyways, guys, that's it for this review. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. I'm Vile Self.
I'm TV Fish.
I'll see you guys in the next one.